In 2008, Lionhead followed its first groundbreaking game, Fable, with the sequel every Fable fan was waiting for. It had story, character features, and the amazing moral system Fable was known for. It was welcomed with open arms and quickly became a favourite for fans of the franchise. Now it's almost 20 years later, and my question is, how did it hold up? Is it still the powerhouse game it once was? And is it worth playing in 2025? Hey guys, my name's Ant from Gaming Antics, and today we're going to have a look at Fable 2 and how it stacks up in 2025. With so many RPGs out there and so many different styles to choose from, is Fable 2 a good choice in today's market? Let's talk about it. Fable 2 from Lionhead Studios is an action role-playing game where your decisions mean everything. Set 500 years after the events of the first game, the hero goes on a journey with his four-legged companion to stop Lucian, the man that killed his sister, from using the Spire to bring back his family and recreate the world to rid it of the chaos that exists outside of the Spire. You meet many interesting characters along your journey and fight against the most dangerous creatures in all of Albion, and the story is filled with legendary ups and downs that a lot of people still talk about these days. I just finished my playthrough of Fable 2, and we're going to take a look at the different aspects of the game and see how they held up. And at the end of the video, we're going to make a decision whether this is a game that still can be played in 2025, or whether it should be left in the heroes legends of the early 2000s. So Fable 2 is an action role-playing game where you take on the role of this generation's hero. The story follows our hero, known also as Sparrow, as they fight to destroy Lord Lucian Fairfax, while he attempts to use the willpower to complete the ancient spire and resurrect his family. Somewhere in there is mention of him somehow using this to recreate the world in his own ideals, but I'm not sure where that actually connects. There is a big focus in this game, as there was in the first one, on the moral system, which changes the way the world perceives the hero based on their decisions. This, combined with the extensive world lore and different styles of NPCs, there's a lot to consider with this game. One thing I will mention before we do start is that while I will be making comparisons to the first game, I will try my hardest to judge this one based on its own merits rather than compare it against the first. But there will be some things that will be directly compared, but I hope you understand why they're being compared. Anyway, on with the video. So the first thing we're going to look at in Fable 2 is the exploration and world building. This game is massive, and there are so many areas to journey to. From Bowerstone to the marshes, the environments in Fable 2 each have their own style and vibe, and can really differentiate between the areas, making it easy to buy into the backstories and lore from each of them. We're going to use Westcliff and Wraith Marshes as our examples for this one. When first arriving at Westcliff, it feels very mercenary camp. Lawless and dangerous, with all sorts of people calling it home, and with next to no protection from the outside world. The outskirts is called home to many Belverines and houses the Howling Halls, which we know isn't a safe place. The thing about this area though is that every little detail in the scenery, dialogue, and color style screams this. It tells you that it's dangerous. This is where the world building gets interesting and really shines. The Westcliff development project for Barnum builds on the idea that you can actually change the world depending on your choices. Pay Barnum the investment, and when you return, you see a flourishing Westcliff full of life and opportunity. A completely different, safe city compared to when you left. Don't invest and the place continues to go to ruin. It's this style of gameplay that's still impressive in 2025 and immerses you in the world enough to actually care about what happens to it. Wraithmarsh, though, is a different story. Wraithmarsh is where we see the backstory and the lore of this universe really come into play. While walking through Wraithmarsh, you discover that this area is where Oakvale once resided 500 years ago, the village that our first hero from the original game comes from. Teresa explains the situation that happened in the first game and then proceeds to tell us how the area was sold out by someone doing deals with the Shadow Cult. It's these sorts of connections that make the lore and world building in Fable 2 fantastic, and definitely a reason to immerse yourself into the game. Now for the exploration in Fable 2. It was just as fantastic as the first. I loved the different pathways and challenges between the different areas, and felt that most of the time it was fresh and different. There were a couple of areas that kind of just blended together with very similar bandit encounters, but overall there wasn't enough of this to be an issue. As with the first, the fact that most of the areas felt alive really benefited the exploration of the game. With NPCs moving around their day and different conversations happening while you were doing your thing, Albion always feels alive.
I tell you.
Fable 2 did very well with its world building and exploration, and it's always fun to revisit and dive deep into this world. As part of the series, it really builds on the first game's history, but also sets itself up for more to come, and honestly, that's the part that I love. Now, the story of Fable 2 is one of the areas that I can't help but compare to the first one. And really, the only reason why is because of its major similarities. As a child, your family is taken away from you, a mentor arrives and takes you to the Heroes Guild and starts your training. You go out into the big world to gain the powers you need to defeat the person who wronged you, who also wants you, as your blood is key to the power that they need to take over. It ends with a big showdown. You gain the power of the big bad to either use it for good or bad. And even the Crucible and the Spire mimics the arena and the jail in the first game. And I found myself constantly saying, just like the first one. Now, I'm not saying this is the worst thing, but playing the two games back to back really made it obvious. Putting that little fact aside, the story is still great. Same concept, slightly changed to suit this narrative, with some good NPCs and some great fighting moments. The depth of some of the characters make it worth pushing ahead to help them, and I believe this makes it so that the similarities between the stories differ through experience. Each of the missions to rescue the heroes is a great sidestep itself, and you learn a lot about the world in this current time period by just listening to them. The little added parts, like with Oakvale that I mentioned before, builds on the first story, and I love how we see the aftermath of the first game in the second. Two negatives on the story for me were the Crucible and the Spire. The Crucible felt less like a key game moment and more like a railroaded mini-game. You just had to endure it. It had no real relevance to the story aside from, I need to do this so that Lucian will pick me. And honestly, this was one of my least favorite parts of the game. As for the Spire, I felt like the entire sequence was just one big lore dump. It was around an hour of walking back and forward, listening to dialogue that didn't really teach me anything new I didn't already know about Lucian. There is literally a mission in the Spire where you stand there for 2 minutes listening to someone talk about not being fed. I understood the horrors of the Spire the first 20 times someone said it. It felt like the Spire was only there to explain Lucian's henchmen more than anything, and a quick escape scene with Garth would have been more than enough. But the major downfall of the story, in my opinion, is the ending. The final confrontation with Lucian and the ending of the hero's journey really went out with a fizzle rather than a bang. It was nice to revisit the music box and have that being the key to the ending. The Jack of Blades fight was epic, but Lucian just kind of died. That's it. I really wanted a big climax with an epic fight, but all we really got was a cutscene. The decisions surrounding that final hour were really bland and played out like a movie rather than a game. They really are lucky the rest of the story's interactions were great, because this almost changed my mind on Fable 2. I won't go too much into the atmosphere, apart from to say they nailed it. There's not much more to say than that. Continuing on from what I said with the world building, each area embodies the atmosphere it's trying to sell. And I think the game does such a great job of creating certain feelings depending on the location or environment that the character is in. It's an A+, honestly. So next up, let's talk about combat. It's another area that I'm going to directly compare to number 1. The combat improvements in Fable 2 were massive. As per the first game, there are 3 main areas in combat: melee, ranged, and will. The melee felt fantastic, the auto target was great, and the issues I had in the first with the invincibility frames and not being able to hit characters while they were downed were almost fixed. Occasionally I found myself waiting for enemies to recover so I could hit again, but it wasn't enough for me to build my entire character around focusing on that. The ranged was a major improvement with the crossbow and the firearms, and I used these far more than will this time around. The firearms felt fun to use, they were powerful, easy to aim, and useful in a lot of situations. Against the trolls, they were A tier. Really happy with this upgrade. The will powers, on the other hand, were a little clunky. The area use of the will powers for me was hard to utilize correctly, and there were times where I tried to fire off magic and ended up just creating a pretty little light show around me. I definitely used the willpower a lot less in this one compared to the first, but as I said in the first, it didn't take away from the combat, and honestly, it could have just been a skill issue. At no point during the game did I feel like I needed a specific style, and not learning how to use it wasn't taken away from my experience. It was a well-rounded combat system with a lot of variety and depth, and definitely adds to the enjoyment of the game instead of taking away from it. Now, the leveling and trees system was pretty much the same. It didn't vary too much from the first, and that's fine, as it's a It's a pretty well-oiled machine. The experience orbs you gain depend on the way you use a skill or ability, and then you spend the points on unlocks within the skill or magic section. A very simple segment here, and it's well done, so just moving on from that. Looking at all this as a whole, the gameplay and mechanics were great. The tutorials on how to use everything explained the majority of it very well, and aside from my little issue with the power and the area effects, I understood how to use my attacks and abilities quite well, I think. The puzzles within the game were well done, challenging but not too frustrating. The only thing I will say about this is I would have liked a little more variance in the challenge. For the most part, it's combat focused, but things like the pirate treasure mission with more physical puzzle section would have been good. But once again, it doesn't take away from the game. It's just something I would have liked to have seen. Now, the decisions and the moral-based progression in this game were done really, really well. There were a lot of moments where choices I made me actually have to think. Do I give the alcoholic his bottle back? Do I save the girl or my youth? Do I revive anyone or bring back my dog? I love that the game made me feel uncomfortable with the decisions that I was making because it actually changed the way I myself perceived the world. I mentioned in the first Fable review that the decisions meant nothing to me personally, and they didn't really help me shape my view of the world. And I still stick by that, but these decisions were actually hard to make, with consequences I still think about now, especially after editing my videos and looking back on why did you do that? But I love this game's ability to make you feel like your decisions matter, and they may or may not ruin someone's life within the game. It's this type of immersion that I think Fable 2 does fantastic. Now, I didn't even add this into my script, but one thing I did want to mention is in my last Fable review, I mentioned that you couldn't buy property, and I regret saying that because I found out recently you can buy property in Fable 1. But one of the things that Fable 2 does fantastically is that entrepreneur situation where you buy up properties, you buy up businesses, and you start getting that passive income in. So one of the challenges I wanted to do in this game was to buy every property. It took forever, but it was very enjoyable. So hats off to them for the property stuff and the landlord stuff. It's a lot of fun. It really is. So now Fable 2, even with some issues in the story and the gameplay, it still plays amazingly and is a great game to play today. It flows well, it's got hours of entertainment that keeps you wanting to push through, and as I've already said multiple times, it really builds on the Albion story, both consolidating previous storylines and building new openings for future content. One of the things I love about this universe is I always finish the game and I'm left asking more questions than when I entered. I need to know more about the backstories. I need to know more about the town lore. There is always something I want to know. In 2025, it's 100% worth going back and playing, whether it's your first time or if you're looking to revisit some quirky hero fun. I highly recommend lovers of RPGs to just jump in. You won't be disappointed. If I had to give it a rating, I'd give it a 4 out of 5. The story, even with the janky ending, is absolutely fantastic and easy to fall in love with. The gameplay is fun and addictive, and you can spend hours walking around Albion discovering all there is to know about this world. With the many different decisions that forge this hero's path, there is so many chances to replay this one as well. It's just a solid retro title. Did you play Fable 2 back in the day, or is this one that you've picked up recently and are experiencing it as a retro title? Would you recommend it to someone in 2025? Let me know in the comment section. If you like retro game collecting or seeing someone play your favorite games for the very first time, consider subscribing. We do a lot of that around here and we'd love to have you around for the journey. If you want to see my thoughts on the first Fable or you want to see a playthrough of either game, click down here. And thank you for watching my 2025 review of Fable 2, and I'll see you in the next one. And as always, enjoy your gaming.